Yo, what's up? So, I kind of want to talk about this, and the title of this video is going to be called Why Businesses Prefer Part-Time Workers versus Full-Time Workers. And to sum it all up, the reason why businesses prefer part-time workers versus full-time workers is just one word and one word only: commitment. And commitment goes both ways. It don't necessarily go the way of the employee. It also goes to the employer. And there's pros and cons to anything, including hiring personnel, whether it's full-time or part-time. With full-time, you obviously, a full-time worker is going to demand more hours, better pay, more benefits, such as medical, dental, as well as vacation, personal days, holidays, things of that nature. And that can tally up to be a fortune for a business. And with part-timers, you don't really necessarily have to give them a lot of hours. You don't really necessarily have to pay them or match them to what you're paying a full-time worker. And you don't necessarily have to give them full-time benefits. You give them some benefits, but not full-time benefits. You can give it, and in some cases, you can give it an option where the employee that determines whether or not if he or she wants the benefits. With part-time workers, the commitment factor plays a huge part with the employer, because a part-time worker, you don't necessarily have to be tied to them. You don't necessarily have. You're under the assumption that this part-time worker is only here temporarily, and he or she is not going to be here 10, 20, 30 years. Where when you're dealing with a full-time worker, obviously the full-time worker is committed to you and wants you to be committed to them. And when you talk about how long they're willing to stay at a job, of course, no matter if it's part-time or full-time, if you're not happy at a certain place, of course, you might come to the conclusion of maybe quitting or finding something else. But the majority of full-time workers, they're totally committed because they have other responsibilities. Normally, in some cases, a full-time worker is an older adult who has responsibilities with like family, school, or family, school, or they have responsibilities such as bills. So, and they're living out on their own. With a part-time worker, not all, but there are some part-time workers that are going to be a lot younger. They're going to be like school kids and college kids who only wants to be here temporary until they graduate and utilize their diploma into something, their degree into something else. And it's like a stepping stone to them. They're stepping to the next thing. They're riding on the next wave. With a full-time worker, that's not the case. The average full-time worker is probably going to stay there longer than 7 years. And businesses consider them full-time workers. Some of them stay as long as, some of them stay as far as their retirement age. And in some cases, there are some full-time workers that are not going to retire, and they love their job so much they're willing to stay at their job as long as possible. But business in general, they prefer to have someone there. If you just stack it up, and let's just say the part-time worker is giving you the same type of productivity as the full-time worker, then businesses will prefer the part-time worker, because you're not going to pay them that much and they're not willing to stay, and the corporation and the business will run a risk of finding someone else, if not someone else that can fit that criteria, someone else that's like a band-aid, so they do find someone that fits that criteria. With a full-time, if you have a full-time worker and a full-time worker, and both of them are not giving you the best productivity in your business, then logically, well, the part-time worker will be younger. If you tell them to they're not cutting out, they're not working out, chances are they're going to quit and move on to something else. With a full-time worker that has a lot of responsibilities, the conversation is going to be much different, because he or she is not going to quit just because you tell them to quit. They're going to move on until there's something to move on to. So there's a possibility that you might keep this full-time worker that's not giving you the type of productivity a little longer than a part-time worker. And a lot of full-time workers are smart enough to know that if you let them go, then if they haven't still found a job yet, the possibility of them applying for unemployment, that costs the business. They have to consider that a loss. With a part-time worker, they're not going to work. They haven't worked enough hours to generate them to sit back and take unemployment. Certain cases they do, but in other cases they don't. So those are the pros and cons of a full and part-time worker, and why a lot of corporations, a lot of businesses are attracted to part-time workers. They're convenient. They're not going to be there that long. They're not going to be demanding as far as their pay. And they're easier to replace versus a full-time worker, because you have to be fully involved and fully committed to a full-time worker. If that full-time worker had been at your job or your business for like 7 or 8 years, chances are that full-time worker, you probably done trained him or her to do other things at your business. And if it comes to the conclusion that full-time worker is not working out, then you're going to have to replace that full-time worker with another full-time worker. So generally, businesses would rather let that full-time worker go and replace his position with a part-time worker that can possibly do some, if not all, what you had with that full-time worker. That's why a lot of businesses prefer a part-time worker over a full-time worker, and that's where the struggle begins. And ultimately, this is going to be how businesses work and function for the foreseeable future. It's no different than Uber. It's no different than the delivery services out there. The ride-sharing services out there. They're looking for people who's not fully committed, who just comes in, makes money for them as well as themselves, and then they move on to the next person. You don't have to pay a lot to keep this worker here. You don't have to train a lot to keep this worker here. You don't have to give this worker full-time benefits, full-time health care, things of that nature. And that's what the full-time, it's getting now so more than ever. Like if you there are jobs all over the place. And that's going to lead to my next video, Do America Truly Wants to Work? That's why you can drive up and down the street and everybody has a now hiring sign. Why? Because of a lot of those businesses, the the flexibility of them getting workers and losing workers, businesses are no longer going to that old format of starting off part-time, working your way up, then you become full-time, and then they would like for you to stay at the corporation for many, many years. Businesses are no longer doing that no more. So that's all I got for this video. I'm gonna try to come out with some more videos on this channel. Please rate, comment, subscribe. This is a new channel, so I hope you guys appreciate what I talked about, and I will see you guys on the next video.